Out here, far from anything familiar, there's a world wrapped in a red fog that never seems to settle. From a distance, it barely looks alive, just a quiet sphere drifting in its own slow rhythm. But the closer you get, the more you realize nothing on this planet ever truly stays still. Even the silence has its own pulse, hidden deep beneath the haze. From a distance, the planet doesn't give much away. It hangs there in the dark, wrapped in something that moves so faintly you almost question whether it's moving at all. A dull red haze clings to the whole sphere, the color soft enough to look calm, yet unsettled enough to keep your attention locked on it. There's no storm pattern, no clear shape to the atmosphere, just this constant trembling across its surface, as though the fog never really settles into place. As we drift closer, the world's edges stop looking smooth. That haze thickens, and the red starts folding over itself in slow currents. There's no sign of oceans or continents below. Not from out here. Everything is buried under that moving blanket. It's strangely quiet, too. Most worlds have some restless energy about them at a distance. Bright storms, sharp glints from frozen clouds, bands of color spun by winds. But this one barely reacts to anything. It just waits. The glow around it deepens the closer we get. It's not bright, just steady, as though the whole planet is lit from within. The fog catches that faint light and carries it around the globe in slow drifting waves. Nothing breaks through the surface. No mountains, no oceans, no green, no blue, only the red trembling across the world in patient layers. The upper atmosphere reaches us before anything else does. You can tell when we slip into it because the stars behind us start fading one by one. The haze thickens around us without rushing or swirling. It just arrives gently, like a curtain closing. There's no turbulence, no sound, just this soft pressure against the air, growing heavier as we descend. The red fog surrounds us completely now. It hangs in uneven sheets, drifting past in slow bends and folds. Every movement is quiet, almost hesitant. It doesn't rush or twist. It simply shifts around us as though it's been drifting this way for centuries without interruption. The light changes again as we move deeper, less from above, more from the fog itself. A muted glow pulses through it in faint waves, hard to track and impossible to predict. The deeper we go, the more those pulses spread, as if each layer responds to the next. It isn't chaotic. It's more like the whole atmosphere is breathing in its own slow rhythm, though nothing about it feels alive in a familiar way. Depth is difficult to judge. The fog never breaks, never thins, never reveals what lies beneath. It just keeps going, heavier with each passing moment, but never thick enough to feel trapped. There's still space. There's still air. The red stays constant, shifting just enough to remind you there's movement all around. And then the first hints of the world below start to appear, not through sight, but through the faint change in the air. The pressure settles differently. The glow around us dims. The atmosphere feels lower, more grounded, as though the surface is somewhere close, hidden under one final layer of that trembling red. We keep descending, and the world waits. The fog quiets, the light softens, everything slows. The fog thickens again, but not in a way that blocks everything out. It just becomes heavier, more settled, almost like we've crossed into a part of the atmosphere that doesn't care much about what's above it. The glow fades into something dimmer, and the red shifts from a drifting haze into slow, weighty folds that slide past with a kind of tired patience. There's a sense that we're close to the ground, even though there's still no sign of it. The air feels different here. Not hostile, just dense, as if every movement pushes against something that doesn't like being disturbed. It's strangely calm. No rush of wind, no rumble of anything moving below. Just this low, steady quiet that settles into everything. Even the fog barely stirs unless we're moving through it. Shadows start to form inside the haze. Not clear shapes, just faint breaks in the glow, small dips where the light doesn't bounce the same way. It's enough to tell us that something is down there, land, formations, terrain, but nothing reveals itself. It's all hidden behind this trembling curtain that never fully clears. Every now and then a ridge or drop in the ground tries to outline itself through the thickness, but it disappears as quickly as it shows. There's an odd stillness to it all, the kind that feels like the world has been sitting untouched for a long time. Nothing pushes upward from the surface, no clouds rising, no heat currents. Just this quiet, steady world that keeps everything level. If there's life here, it must have adapted to silence, because nothing breaks it. The ground finally starts making itself known through the change under us. The air becomes heavier the closer we get, but not in a suffocating way, more like the atmosphere is adjusting around us, reshaping itself to guide us toward the surface. The tremble in the fog isn't constant anymore. It flickers in patches like little ripples spreading through a pond. Some patches brighten for a second, others dim. None of it feels random, but none of it feels directed either. A faint texture begins to show. The fog thins in tiny pockets, just enough that the surface peeks through before closing again. The ground looks dark, almost black beneath the haze, the kind of material that absorbs whatever touches it. But every glimpse is gone too fast to make out anything more than the color. The fog guards it relentlessly, never letting us see more than fragments. Every movement downward presses the red curtain aside, but it slips back into place just as easily, always smoothing itself out again. Even disturbances feel temporary here. Like this world doesn't hold on to disruption, it resets itself quietly. We drop lower. The fog settles thicker around the ankles of the landforms beneath, clinging to every rise and slope. The surface glow changes again, shifting into a deeper tone, still red but heavier, almost bruised. It drifts past in slow coils that twist around unseen features. When we're finally close enough, the haze thins just enough to show the outline of the terrain. Not fully, just clearer than before. Long stretches of flat ground broken up by uneven mounds. Some ridges curve gently upward. Others drop suddenly into darker areas where the fog sinks like cold water filling a basin. There's a faint vibration in the air at this level, not sound. More like the atmosphere is pulsing in tiny, steady intervals you only notice after a while. The entire world seems to move to that rhythm. The fog responds to it. The ground absorbs it. Everything syncs up in this slow, steady pattern that feels ancient and undisturbed. The surface isn't far now. You can tell by the way the fog changes shape, less drifting, more settling. It gathers thicker at the base of the landforms, almost pooling, though it never truly rests. The trembling never leaves it. It shivers constantly, a thin, quiet movement woven into everything. We reach the point where the ground waits just beneath our feet, hidden under one final layer of red. The fog parts a little more. The darkness below grows clearer. The world feels close enough to touch. The last layer of fog gives way slowly, as if it's deciding whether it wants to reveal what's beneath it. It doesn't clear fully. It just loosens enough that the ground finally shows itself in uneven patches. The surface isn't bright. It doesn't shine or reflect anything. It just sits there in that deep, dark tone, absorbing whatever faint light the fog gives off. The closer we get, the more detail emerges. The ground has a rough, broken texture, hard, solid, cracked in long lines that disappear under the fog. Some cracks run shallow, others sink into darkness. The haze drifts across them in low waves, filling some, rolling out of others, always shifting, never staying in one place for long. The movement is slow, deliberate, almost cautious. Touching down here feels different from landing on other worlds. The atmosphere presses close, heavy but stable. The ground absorbs the weight without complaint, as if nothing has touched it a very long time. There's no sound when feet meet the surface. No crunch, no echo, no dust rising. Just a quiet connection between us and this still, dark landscape. The fog gathers around the ankles immediately. It clings in a low ring, trembling constantly, never fully settling. Up close, The shiver looks more intricate. Tiny, constant vibrations running through the red, each one sending faint ripples outward. It's not random. It moves in a slow, steady pulse that carries through the air and into the ground. The whole world seems built on that single rhythm. Looking ahead, the terrain stretches out in uneven waves. Low rises fade into the fog in the distance. Shallow basins hold thicker pools of red haze, making them look like they're filled with liquid even though they're not. Every few steps, the atmosphere shifts slightly, just enough to make the horizon blur and clear in cycles. The air is warm, not uncomfortably so, just warm enough that the fog carries a faint humidity. Breathing here feels dense, like the atmosphere is layered with invisible weight. There's no smell, nothing sharp or chemical, just a neutral warmth that fills the lungs slowly. The ground reacts a little to movement, not in a dramatic way. It doesn't sink or shift, but some of the cracks release a faint pulse of deeper color when stepped near, like the pressure unsettles whatever glows beneath the surface. It brightens for a moment, then fades again, calm and controlled. Far off, a low ridge rises out of the fog. The top is barely visible, but it breaks the landscape just enough to give a sense of scale. Getting closer reveals that it's not a smooth rise. Its surface is worn, uneven, with small pockets and fractures across it. The fog drifts around each indentation like it's tracing every contour before moving on. The trembling in the air becomes clearer here. It's not loud, but it's consistent, a faint buzzing sensation that you feel more than hear. The ground carries it upward and the fog carries it outward. Everything participates in it, even the stillness. If there's life here, it hides well. Nothing moves independently. No shapes dart through the fog, no shadows break away from the haze. Even the red glow remains stable, dimming and brightening with the same patient pulse. But the world doesn't feel empty. It feels like something exists beneath the surface, deeper than sight, deeper than the cracks. Something slow, something that's accustomed to silence and long stretches of time. Stepping further, the fog thickens again around the edge of a shallow drop. It clings closer here, pulsing in slow spirals as if reacting to the depth below. The drop isn't dramatic, just a rough slope leading into a basin coated in trembling haze. The glow is stronger at the bottom, spreading outward in quiet, steady waves. The descent is gentle. The texture of the ground stays the same, hard, cracked, absorbing the weight of each step without shifting. The fog around the basin rises and falls in slow breaths, obscuring everything below knee height. The deeper we move into it, the heavier the air becomes, but it never tips into discomfort. It just presses in with a steady, constant presence. At the center of the basin, the light grows slightly stronger, not bright, just enough to outline the circular shape beneath the fog. The ground pulses faintly, responding to the same rhythm that fills the air. It's subtle, barely noticeable unless you stand still long enough to sync with it. For a moment, everything becomes completely still. No ripple, no movement, just a quiet world waiting under a ceiling of red. The stillness doesn't last. It never really does on this planet. After a few moments, the faint pulse running through the fog returns, spreading outward from somewhere deep below the surface. It comes slowly, almost gently, like the world is reminding you that it's still awake under all this silence. The red haze lifts a little with each pulse, then settles again, never rising higher than a few inches before sinking back around your legs. The center of the basin has its own atmosphere to it. The glow here is slightly stronger than the rest, enough that the ground beneath the fog shows itself in short glimpses. The cracks are wider, deeper, stretching like old fractures from some long-forgotten shift in the terrain. The haze spills into those openings constantly, slipping down and rolling back up in slow curls. It never stops moving, but it never rushes either. Everything keeps to that same slow rhythm. Standing still makes the pulse in the air easier to feel. You sense it through the soles of your feet first, a quiet thud that spreads across the ground and into the fog. A second follows it, then a third, each one evenly spaced, patient, never demanding attention but impossible to ignore once you notice it. Whatever causes it feels deep-rooted, like it's part of the world's foundation rather than something on the surface. Moving toward the far edge of the basin, the fog becomes heavier again. It gathers around your knees in thicker layers, and every step pushes it aside in slow, reluctant swells. As it parts, more of the ground shows itself, still cracked, still dark, but with faint red lines running through some of the deeper fractures. They glow dimly, pulsing in time with the atmosphere. They look like they're carrying something warm through the rock, though not enough to give off heat. The slope leading out of the basin rises slowly, barely noticeable at first. The haze thins just enough to show the path ahead, though it never fully clears. The ridges surrounding the basin come back into view, soft shapes outlined by the glow that filters through the fog. They look larger from this angle, their edges sharper, their shadows deeper. Climbing the slope reveals new details in the terrain. Some parts of the ground are smoother, as though worn down by whatever once moved across them. Other areas are more jagged, with broken edges jutting out before disappearing into the haze again. The world doesn't look uniform. It feels like it's shaped by long cycles of quiet changes rather than dramatic events. Once you reach the top of the ridge, the landscape spreads out again, wide and quiet. The fog hangs low across the ground in a long, trembling field that stretches far into the distance. The glow is softer here, almost fading, as if this part of the world sees less movement, less disturbance. The pulse is weaker but still present, carried through the haze in long, gentle waves. In the far distance, something breaks the uniformity, a cluster of rising shapes, barely visible through the red. They don't look sharp or artificial. They're more like tall, uneven formations shaped by slow erosion or old pressure from within the planet. The fog swirls around their bases in steady rings, drawn to them as if something beneath them affects the movement of the air. Getting closer reveals that these formations aren't single towers but clusters of columns. Some stand alone, others lean together in uneven angles. The cracks in the ground bunch up around them, as though the landscape shifted long ago, and these were the parts strong enough to stay upright. The fog moves differently here too, slightly quicker, as if reacting to the height of the structures. The hum in the air strengthens with each step toward them. It's still not loud, but it's clearer, more defined, like the atmosphere is channeling it upward through these columns. When you stand at the base of one, the pulse feels more direct, traveling through the ground and up the structure before spreading into the fog around it. Running a hand across the surface of the nearest formation reveals a texture that doesn't match the rest of the ground. It's smoother, more compact, as though it's fused differently. The glow from the fog reflects faintly off it, creating a soft red sheen that rolls across the stone as the haze shifts around you. There's a faint opening between two of the taller columns, a narrow gap where the fog drifts inward, pulled slightly by the deeper air beyond. The pulse inside that gap feels stronger, like the vibrations from within the world gather there before spreading back outward again. Stepping through the gap leads into a sheltered space. The fog hangs thicker here, clinging to the ground in low pools that ripple occasionally. The glow deepens, reflecting off the inner surfaces of the stone. The hum resonates clearly, spreading through the enclosed space in a slow, steady rhythm. Nothing moves within the chamber except the haze, yet the atmosphere feels attentive somehow. Not alive, in any familiar sense, just aware. A place shaped by long periods of calm, carrying the steady memory of something beneath it. The chamber holds the fog differently than the outside world. It doesn't drift freely here. It clings in layered sheets stacked low to the ground, each one trembling with that same steady pulse running through the entire planet. The deeper glow inside the chamber sits beneath everything, almost like it's waiting for the chance to rise but never fully commits. The columns stretch upward into the haze, their tops disappearing into the dim red light. Even this close, their scale is hard to judge. Their surfaces feel worn, shaped by whatever slow forces this world relies on instead of storms or wind. There are faint marks in the stone, lines that run vertically with long breaks in between, like the rock was pushed upward in separate stages rather than grown or carved. Walking deeper inside, the ground changes again. The cracks become narrower, tighter, as if the world holds them closed here. The surface feels denser underfoot, firmer. Each step sends a subtle vibration through the floor, and the planet responds with that familiar pulse that rolls back toward you a moment later. It's not loud, but it's consistent, like a heartbeat buried under rock and fog. Toward the far end of the chamber, the fog collects in a thick curl around a wide depression in the ground. The basin here is deeper than the last one. Steeper walls, tighter space, the glow below a shade darker. The haze moves differently too, circling the edges in slow, looping spirals rather than drifting across the surface. It draws your attention whether you want it to or not. Standing at the edge, you can feel a faint warmth rising from the depression. Not heat, just a slight lift in temperature, enough to make the air feel fuller. The fog responds by trembling more intensely in small waves that spread out in circles. Each wave reaches the walls of the chamber and bounces back silently, creating a layered pattern in the haze that appears and disappears depending on how the light hits it. The pulse grows stronger here. You can feel it in your chest, the rhythm lining up with your own breathing. It comes from below, deep below, carried upward through the stone and into the air. The entire basin acts like a conduit, delivering each vibration with more clarity than anywhere else you've been so far. If the planet has roots of energy or movement, this place feels close to where they gather. Stepping down the slope of the depression is slow work. The ground grows smoother the lower you go, the cracks closing into faint, shallow lines. The glow intensifies gently, never harsh, always steady. The fog gets thicker as you descend, rising up to your knees, then higher. It never obstructs entirely, it just becomes heavier, like walking through warm breath shaped into weight. Halfway down, the light from the fog begins responding to each footstep. Small ripples roll outward along the surface of the haze, brightening slightly before settling back to their usual dim tone. It happens every time, rhythmic and predictable, as if this place recognizes movement in its presence and marks it without altering anything else. Reaching the bottom reveals something new. A circular platform, slightly raised, almost perfectly level. The fog parts around the edges of it without drifting across its surface. The platform looks like it's made from the same stone as the columns, but smoother, more compacted. Its edges are rounded, and the faint glow from below outlines its shape clearly. The pulse is strongest here. Standing on the edge of the platform, you can feel the vibration travel up through your legs and into your torso with each slow beat. It's not aggressive. It's steady, controlled, the kind of rhythm a world falls into after existing quietly for a very long time. The fog around the depression rises and falls in time with the pulse, its trembling forming small, near-silent waves. There's no sign of movement from anything living, no tracks, no sounds besides the quiet vibration, no shifting forms in the haze. But nothing about the place feels empty. The air carries purpose, even without intent. Every part of the world reacts to something deeper inside it, and this chamber feels like one of the places where that deeper presence gets closest to the surface. At the far side of the inner basin, beyond the platform, a narrow passage opens between two columns. The fog curls into it slowly, like the air inside draws it inward. The red light inside the passage flickers faintly, not in a chaotic way, just in uneven patterns that suggest movement further down. It's the first time the glow has behaved unpredictably. The pulse, steady everywhere else, shifts slightly near the passageway, still even, still controlled, but carrying a different weight, a different depth. Like whatever runs through this planet is more concentrated in the direction ahead. The chamber remains perfectly still behind you. The fog waits. The passage waits. The world continues its slow rhythm. The narrow gap between the two tall columns closes behind you quicker than expected. It isn't the stone shifting, it's the fog. It slides back into place almost immediately, thickening until the entrance becomes nothing more than a faint red blur. Inside, the air feels tighter. Not tense, just concentrated, like this part of the world contains the densest version of its atmosphere. The passage ahead stretches out longer than it looked from the chamber above. The fog isn't as chaotic here. It hangs close to the ground in long, trembling strips, each one reacting to the pulse in the stone beneath your feet. The deeper rhythm you felt in the basin above travels through the floor with more precision in this space, like the world is guiding you toward its source. The walls on either side are smoother than the columns. Whatever shaped them worked slowly, pressing the stone into rounded surfaces free of cracks or jagged edges. They carry only faint traces of glowing red veins, thin lines that brighten momentarily when the deeper pulse hits, then fade back into the darkness. As you keep moving, the ceiling lowers until the fog brushes against it. The air grows warmer. Not uncomfortably warm, but enough that each breath feels heavier than the last. The fog reacts to your movement more visibly now, parting just slightly at the knees and curling behind you like it's tracking the path you've taken. Eventually, the passage widens into a small chamber. The ceiling rises again, enough for the fog to build into higher layers that shiver in uneven stacks. The walls curve inward, shaping the room into a circular space that feels like a natural junction between the tunnels above and whatever lies deeper below. At the center sits a shallow platform, a foreign thing down here, not because it looks built, but because the stone around it looks compacted and subtly raised, as if something beneath pushed upward at some point in the past. The fog gathers around the platform's edges in a low ring, trembling harder than in the outer chamber. Standing near the platform reveals the reason. The deeper beat feels stronger here. Not louder, not faster, just more focused. It pulses through the stone in sharp, deliberate vibrations that climb into your legs, settling into your chest before fading again. Every time the rhythm lands, the fog around the platform tightens in a visible ripple, then loosens and returns to its steady trembling. The platform itself is etched with faint markings, shallow grooves spreading outward in slow arcs. They don't glow constantly, but they catch the light whenever the pulse hits them, reacting in small crimson flashes. They look like patterns created by natural pressure cycles rather than anything carved intentionally. Stepping onto the platform doesn't change anything right away. It holds firm beneath your weight. The fog falls to either side. The pulse remains steady, but the more you stand there, the more the world shifts. A subtle warmth rises through the stone, a calm, steady heat radiating from somewhere underneath. The grooves brighten slightly longer with each pulse, as though the planet is checking something, gauging your presence without altering its rhythm for you. When the next deeper beat rolls through, the platform reacts in a way you haven't seen yet. The glow spreads across its surface in a slow wave, pressing outward until it reaches the edges of the chamber. The fog rises in response, lifting by a few inches before dropping again with the next heartbeat. It's not a warning, not a shift in hostility. It feels more like acknowledgement, a recognition that something new is standing here, even if the world remains indifferent to what that means. Once the light fades, a second opening becomes visible on the far wall. It sits low to the ground, partially concealed by fog that slides over it in slow, consistent lines. The pulse running beneath the stone travels directly toward that opening before returning, as if the deeper rhythm flows from that direction. Approaching it reveals a faint draft, warm, controlled, steady. It carries a thicker version of the red haze, darker, heavier, almost maroon, drifting outward in slow, broad pulses. The passage beyond is smaller, narrower, and far denser, with fog. This is where the heartbeat becomes clearer, where the patterns you followed start tightening into something more deliberate, where the world feels less like terrain and more like a system. A slow-moving, ancient system that's been running quietly long before you arrived. The tunnel narrows as you move further in, lowering the ceiling until the fog brushes the top of your shoulders. It doesn't sting or cling, it simply reacts to your presence with a slow, steady shift, as if it's adjusting itself to make room. The pulse in the air is clearer here. Instead of spreading out in wide waves like above, it travels in narrow lines along the walls and floor, concentrating into small, precise beats that guide you forward. The stone changes again. It loses the rough texture from the upper world and becomes smoother, almost polished, though still carrying that same deep darkness beneath its surface. Every now and then the fog splits just enough to show faint red veins running through the stone, thin, steady lines that brighten when the pulse passes through them. They don't glow constantly, they flicker in short bursts, syncing perfectly with the planet's rhythm. As the tunnel slopes downward, the temperature rises another degree. Not enough to feel hot, just warm enough that the air pushes softly against your skin. The fog thickens around the ankles again, swirling in slow circles that never break their pattern. It feels like the world is managing every movement of the atmosphere down here, controlling how each layer flows and settles. Eventually, the tunnel opens into a wider corridor, long and quiet, stretching farther than the haze will allow you to see. The walls curve gently inward, as if shaped by centuries of slow pressure. The pulse grows deeper in this space, each vibration spreading through the floor and traveling up your legs in a calm, steady wave. It's strong enough that you pause to feel it properly. One long thud, then silence, then another. The world speaks through repetition here, but never raises its voice. The corridor branches ahead. Both paths are filled with fog, though one carries a slightly brighter glow. It's subtle, barely noticeable unless you wait for the pulse to pass again. The brighter path brightens a fraction more with each vibration, while the darker one stays muted and heavy. The brighter path draws the fog toward it in a slow, consistent drift. Each wave rolls inward, disappearing into that direction before forming again behind you. Stepping toward it feels natural, not because it's welcoming, but because the world seems to be guiding you deeper, showing you where its energy travels most. The fog thins just enough to show that this path widens into a tall chamber. The ceiling rises back out of reach, hidden behind thick red layers that shift like distant currents. The walls here are smoother still, shaped into long arcs with faint grooves carved into them. The grooves glow softly, brightening with each pulse, but never holding the light. At the center of this new chamber lies a circular depression, much shallower than the one above, but far more defined. The ground inside it dips evenly, forming a perfect bowl that seems built for the purpose of gathering the planet's energy. The fog sits thinner here, almost reluctant to settle in the deepest part. Instead, it hovers a few inches above the floor, trembling with sharper vibrations. Standing at the edge of the bowl, the pulse hits you with more clarity than anywhere else you've been. It travels up through the soles of your feet and settles in your chest before fading away again. The world feels closer here, not physically, but in presence. Like this is one of the places where its inner processes rise closer to the surface. Down in the center of the bowl sits a single formation. Not quite a stone pillar, not quite a natural rise, something in between. It grows from the floor with a blunt, rounded top, cracked in several places where faint red lines pulse through it. Each pulse lights the cracks for a heartbeat, then they fade back to their deep, dormant color. The rhythm is steady, predictable, patient. Approaching it, the air shifts. There's no wind, but the fog pulls slightly toward the formation, drawn in small threads that dissolve the moment they touch it. The stone reacts with a faint twitch of light each time, like the planet acknowledges the movement, but doesn't change its pace for it. Touching the formation reveals a warmth that wasn't present anywhere else. It's not hot, just warm enough to feel alive in a quiet, geological way. The surface is smoother than stone should be, as if countless cycles of energy have passed through it. The glow brightens under your hand for a moment, then settles back into its regular pattern. The pulse continues. The fog holds its trembling rhythm. The chamber waits, fully settled, as if this is one of the places where the world comes closest to showing its purpose. Another passage opens at the back of the chamber, low and steady, carrying darker fog that moves in slower waves. The pulse echoes from that direction with a deeper tone, thicker and more deliberate. The passage at the back of the chamber feels noticeably different the moment you step toward it. The air grows heavier before you've even crossed the threshold, like the atmosphere thickens in anticipation. The fog here is darker, almost maroon instead of red, and it hangs low in uneven shapes that shift only when disturbed. It's not hostile, just dense, as though the deeper parts of the planet hold on to their haze more tightly. The pulse changes too. It doesn't speed up or slow down. It simply becomes deeper, a heavier vibration that travels through the floor in broader waves instead of quick tremors. Each one spreads out slowly, taking its time to fill the corridor. The walls react by brightening in thin, faint lines that run horizontally along their surfaces, then fade back to darkness. The effect repeats with every pulse, creating a slow rhythm of light and shadow. The corridor slopes downward at a shallow angle, never steep enough to feel like a true descent, but long enough that it's clear you're moving deeper into the planet. The air grows warmer the further you go. Not uncomfortably warm, just a steady rise in temperature that suggests whatever powers this world lies far beneath the surface. The stone underfoot changes texture again. It becomes softer, almost muted, like it's absorbing more of the vibration than before. The fog reacts to each step, curling upward in slow spirals that cling to your legs before sinking back into place. Each movement sends faint ripples outward, though they're swallowed by the heavier fog before they travel too far. After a while, the corridor widens noticeably. It doesn't open into a chamber immediately. It simply expands into a broader, longer space where the ceiling disappears completely behind the haze. The walls slip out of reach as well, fading into darkness where the dim red glow can't quite reach. The pulse becomes clearer here, resonating through the air with a fuller tone, like the vibrations have more space to spread. The fog grows thicker around your waist now, warm and trembling, moving in small bursts that push toward the center of the room. It gathers there as if drawn by an unseen pull. The glow under the haze flickers faintly each time a pulse moves through it, lighting up the fog in soft, uneven patches. In the middle of this wide space lies something unexpected, a long, shallow ridge that runs nearly the full length of the floor. It rises gently, not enough to obstruct anything, but enough to divide the room into two uneven halves. The ridge is smoother than the surrounding stone, with no cracks or veins running through it. It looks deliberately formed, though nothing else about this world suggests intentional construction. As you move closer, the fog thins slightly along the top of the ridge, revealing its surface. Thin lines run across it in repeating patterns, parallel grooves etched into the stone in evenly spaced intervals. They don't glow, but they do react. Each pulse sends a faint tremor through them, creating a soft vibration you can feel through your fingertips. Following the ridge leads to an area where the ground dips sharply. Not a deep drop, more like a sink in the terrain, shaped into a wide, circular depression. The fog inside this bowl is the darkest you've seen so far, settling thick and unmoving, trembling only when the pulse reaches it. The edges of the depression glow faintly, marking its shape with a thin outline that shifts in brightness every few seconds. The pulse here carries a second layer beneath the usual rhythm, a faint secondary thud that arrives just a fraction later. It's subtle, almost hidden, but once noticed, it's impossible to ignore. 2 beats repeating steadily, one strong, one softer. It feels like you've reached a point where 2 different processes inside the planet overlap, merging into a single slow pattern. Stepping down into the depression thickens the air noticeably. The fog reaches your chest, warm and shimmering, vibrating in tiny bursts like it's reacting to your presence. Each step makes the haze retreat slightly, only to fill the space again with slow confidence. At the bottom of the depression lies a small circular platform, almost identical to the one you found earlier, but smaller, more focused. Its center holds a single crack, a precise, narrow line emitting a steady red glow. Every pulse brightens it for a split second, then it fades to its base color. This one feels different, less like a conduit, more like the endpoint of something deeper below. The warmth intensifies around it, the fog clings tighter, the pulse synchronizes with the second, softer beat. The deeper rhythm seems to originate from somewhere beyond this point, carried upward through the stone in long, weighted waves. At the far edge of the depression, another tunnel waits, lower, darker, carrying fog that barely moves at all. The entrance to the next tunnel sits low against the stone, shaped more like a natural fold in the ground than a defined passage. The fog around it hangs almost completely still. It trembles, yes, but only in the smallest motions. Barely there shivers that make the haze look frozen until you stare long enough to see the movement. Whatever sits beyond this point doesn't rely on airflow. Everything feels contained, as if the world wants the deeper layers to stay settled. Crossing into the tunnel instantly changes the atmosphere. The air thickens around your shoulders the way water might, slow and heavy, but without the pressure or resistance. The warmth increases again, enough to feel like the planet is drawing heat upward from something far below. The pulse in the ground has grown low and steady, broader and smoother, spreading through the stone like a constant reminder of whatever powers this place. The walls of the tunnel appear closer together here. Not tight enough to restrict movement, but closer than the broad corridors above, creating a sense of direction that feels clearer than anything so far. The stone is darker, almost black, and the faint red veins inside it glow in long, irregular stretches. They no longer flicker. They hold their light for several seconds at a time before dimming, then brightening again. It happens in time with the pulse, but each glow lasts longer than the beat itself, as if the stone is storing energy and letting it bleed out slowly. The fog in this tunnel behaves differently. It doesn't swirl upward or drift aside. It stays at a fixed height, hovering at waist level, trembling in tiny waves that move outward in straight lines rather than circles. Each pulse sends a ripple across the surface of the haze, but the ripple travels far slower than above, like the air is thicker or the movement is being deliberately slowed. Walking through it makes almost no disturbance. The fog parts just enough for your body to pass, then closes quietly, as if nothing happened. The world down here feels careful, controlled in a way the upper layers never were. The deeper you go, the more pronounced that second heartbeat becomes. The softer rhythm grows stronger, rising from the stone in deeper vibrations, pushing through the floor and into the air in slow, heavy waves. It's not random. It matches the main pulse perfectly, always arriving a breath after the primary beat. 2 beats, repeating over and over, steady as the fog's trembling. Eventually, the tunnel begins to slope downward again. The change is subtle at first, barely noticeable, but becomes clearer the further you go. The ceiling lowers gradually, brushing the top of the fog in places before rising again. The entire passage feels like it's curving, forming a long arc deeper into the planet. As you follow the curve, the tunnel widens unexpectedly. The walls slip away into darkness, swallowed by fog and distance. The pulse echoes differently here, less contained, more resonant. The sound isn't literal. It's the way the vibration carries through the ground, spreading out with more freedom than before. The air warms again, but never uncomfortably so, just enough to make the fog shimmer in slow waves. A faint glow appears in the distance. Not red this time, darker, deeper, almost like a low ember smoldering on the horizon. It pulses too, completely in sync with the main rhythm and the softer one beneath it. Each time it brightens, the fog around your knees reacts with the slightest lift, as though drawn toward the glow. Walking toward it brings the light into focus. What looked like a distant mark becomes a structure, if structure is the right word for something this organic. It rises from the floor like a broad mound, low and rounded, cracked across its surface in thick lines that glow with that deep ember-like light. Fog gathers around its base, trembling more sharply here, reacting in tight ripples that travel outward in neat, controlled waves. The mound isn't perfectly round. It has shallow ridges running across its top, forming subtle patterns that emerge only when the glow brightens. The cracks that run through it pulse in longer stretches now, the light holding for several beats at a time before dimming. The stone is warmer here, noticeably warm, as if sitting near a slow-burning fire deep underground. Approaching the mound reveals something new, a faint movement inside the cracks. Not fast, not alive in a familiar sense. More like the glow itself shifts within, sliding deeper and then returning to the surface in slow cycles. The fog reacts each time, tightening its trembling and releasing it again in gentle waves. The pulse grows louder in your body without making a sound. You feel it in your ribs, your arms, the soles of your feet. The deeper layer, the softer second rhythm, has grown strong enough that it feels close, almost directly under you. At the far side of the mound, a narrow slit opens in the stone. The crack glows brightly, then dims, then brightens again. Fog streams toward it, pulled inward in slow, precise threads that never break or flutter. They slide into the slit and disappear into darkness. The entire area feels like a threshold, one of the deepest points the world has allowed you to reach so far. The fog tightens its shiver. The stone warms beneath your feet. The pulse steadies, ready for the next descent. The slit in the mound narrows behind you the moment you enter, almost as if the fog thickens intentionally to close the space you came through. It doesn't trap anything. It just settles back into its usual slow trembling, hiding the outer chamber from view. The warmth rises more noticeably here, surrounding your arms and neck in a calm, constant heat that feels like a natural output from the stone, rather than anything threatening. The passage ahead dips gently, not enough to force you downward, just a steady decline that tells you this layer sits lower than any you've reached so far. The walls glow with a deeper red tone, closer to ember than fog, running in long lines that pulse with the planet's double rhythm. Each beat sends light sliding through the cracks, traveling along them in a slow run before fading. The fog in this tunnel behaves differently. Instead of drifting or swirling, it pulls inward toward the center of the passage, gathering into a low band that hugs the floor. It shivers in short, controlled bursts, every one synced perfectly to the secondary pulse, the softer thud beneath the main rhythm. It's the closest you've come to seeing a layer that obeys only one side of the planet's heartbeat. The deeper you move, the quieter everything becomes. Even the slight tremble of fog seems reduced, as if the world wants this area to stay undisturbed. The walls press in a little closer, and the ceiling lowers until it sits only a few feet above your head. The stone is smooth here, unnaturally so. Not polished, not carved, just shaped by slow, constant forces until all the roughness was pushed away. The tunnel begins to widen after a long stretch of silence. The fog thickens around your waist, warm and steady, trembling in tiny bursts that roll across the surface like small waves. Each pulse stretches the haze outward, then pulls it back in before the next beat arrives. It's measured, consistent, and almost clinical in its precision. Ahead, the passage opens into a circular space carved into the stone. It's smaller than the chambers you've seen above, but far more focused. The floor dips toward the center, where a shallow, bowl-shaped feature lies filled with a deeper, darker fog. This fog doesn't drift. It doesn't swirl. It rests in place, trembling so subtly that the movement looks almost invisible unless you stare directly at it. The bowl pulses with the softer heartbeat. Every time that second rhythm hits, the haze brightens with a low, steady glow, then fades back into shadow. The brighter beat, the main pulse, barely affects it at all. It feels like this place is tuned for one purpose. Moving around the edge of the bowl reveals details that were hidden from a distance. The stone here carries shallow grooves, thin lines etched in looping shapes that tighten as they near the center. They glow faintly at the tail end of each faint pulse, moving in slow, circular runs before fading. The shapes don't look like symbols. They don't look like writing. They look like the result of long-term, repeated pressure, stone reshaped by cycles of energy, moving in the same pattern for longer than anyone could count. A low opening sits on the far wall, so low it nearly brushes the floor. Fog pours out of it in a slow, constant stream, pooling into the bowl in precise waves. The fog isn't random here. It arrives in measured amounts, timed perfectly to the softer thud of the planet's deeper rhythm. With every second pulse, another layer spills out, spreading into the bowl before sinking into place. The temperature rises again as you approach the low opening. The warmth has a steady feel to it, neither rising sharply nor fading. It feels like the natural heat of stone pressed deep beneath the surface, where layers of the world fold and shift slowly over time. The opening leads into a narrow crawl space. Not tight, but lower than anything you've entered so far, forcing your body closer to the trembling fog. The atmosphere here is different again. The heat is thicker. The pulse travels more strongly through the floor. The fog reacts instantly to movement, trailing behind you in thin, glowing lines that fade as soon as the next rhythm hits. The crawl space eventually rises into a sloping path, just high enough to allow you to stand again. The fog grows deeper and darker here, clinging to the stone in long sheets. The double heartbeat merges into a fuller vibration, one continuous wave with two peaks, one strong, one softer, rolling beneath your feet like a slow, geological breath. The passage opens abruptly into a chamber unlike any above. The floor is flat here, perfectly flat, stretching outward in a wide circle of dark stone with a low, shallow ring carved into it. Fog gathers inside the ring in tall columns, rising and sinking like slow pistons, each one moving at the exact pace of the deeper pulse. They never break formation, never fall out of sync. Even the smallest tremble happens in perfect unison. The walls carry glowing fractures that extend upward in branching patterns. They pulse from the bottom up, filling the chamber with a slow rising light each time the rhythm peaks. When the light reaches the highest point, it fades instantly, leaving the entire chamber in a darker, thicker red hue. At the center of the ring lies a feature you haven't seen before, a disc of smooth stone about 10 feet wide. No cracks, no glowing veins, just a single dark surface that absorbs every hint of light around it. The fog never touches it. The trembling flow stops just inches from its edge, held back by something invisible, forming a perfect circular gap around it. The disc vibrates slightly, not enough to sway anything nearby, just enough to show that something deep beneath it is moving at its own pace. The double pulse rises through it, strong and clear, more direct than anywhere else you've been. Standing near the disk makes your chest tighten, not with fear or pressure, but with the feeling that you've reached a depth where the planet's behavior is no longer a byproduct of surface conditions. Down here, everything feels intentional, focused, built into the world's structure as naturally as rock and fog. Every part of the chamber responds to the heartbeat. Every column of haze rises and sinks in perfect timing. Every fracture brightens and dims without missing a beat. The disk waits at the center, silent and unmoving, absorbing the light, absorbing the pulse, absorbing everything the planet sends into it. The circle of untouched stone at the center of the chamber doesn't react at first. It just sits there, flat and completely dark, swallowing every hint of red light around it. The columns of fog keep rising and lowering in their perfect rhythm. The glowing fractures on the walls continue their slow wave of brightening and fading, yet the disk remains silent. It doesn't pulse, it doesn't tremble, it doesn't glow. It behaves like the one thing down here that refuses to participate in the rhythm of the planet. Stepping closer shifts the atmosphere slightly. Not enough to alarm, just enough that the warmth rises in a slow wave, as though the chamber notices movement near its center. The fog pulls away from the disk's edge, forming a thin, trembling ring that stays exactly the same height no matter how near you get. The closer you move, the more obvious that invisible boundary becomes. The haze doesn't cross it. It doesn't even try. It keeps its distance as though the disk demands a clear perimeter. The pulse through the floor grows steadier, not louder, not faster, just more defined, as if your proximity to the disk sharpens the vibration. Each beat runs up your legs, settling in your ribs before fading into the next. The second, softer rhythm follows it closely, the two beats merging into something smoother down here than anywhere else above. Up close, the disk reveals faint details you couldn't see from afar. Its surface looks perfectly flat from a distance, but standing right beside it shows shallow imperfections, tiny dips, slight ridges, subtle texture changes. None of it feels artificial. It's the kind of surface shaped by pressure or heat over long periods, compacted into something denser than the surrounding stone. The warmth coming off it is steady, not rising, not fading, steady, like the disk holds its own temperature independent of the chamber around it. Resting your hand above the surface, not touching it, just above, reveals something else. There's a vibration in the air, subtle and extremely controlled. It feels like a slow, measured hum that never wavers. It doesn't match either heartbeat directly. It sits between them, deeper than the softer pulse, but not as broad as the stronger one. It's the first independent rhythm you've felt anywhere. When the next double beat hits, the disk responds for the first time. Not with sound, not with light, but with a slight tightening of the air above it, as if the space shifts inwards for a single moment. The fog around the ring dips slightly, pulled down by some invisible force, then rises again in perfect sync with the next pulse. The reaction repeats. Every primary beat, every secondary beat. A small tightening, then release. It's subtle enough that you'd miss it if you weren't standing this close. Stepping onto the disk isn't possible. The boundary is firm. The haze refuses to cross it, and the air thickens the moment you try to lean forward. Not a barrier, not a wall, just a pressure that discourages movement onto the stone itself. But walking around it reveals more of what it does. On the far side, the cracks in the stone leading toward the walls are wider, deeper, carrying a brighter glow than anywhere else in the chamber. The fog pulls backward in small streams, rising along the fractures before sinking again. The pulse through the floor strengthens, the deeper beat resonating through the ground in long ripples. It feels like the chamber funnels something into the disk, and the disk absorbs it. Looking closer, you notice faint marks on the floor around the perimeter, circular impressions spaced evenly, as though the stone once shifted outward in small increments. None of the marks are fresh. They're old, worn down, smoothed by time and heat. They don't form a pattern you recognize. They don't look like symbols or purpose-built designs. They look like a geological record, imprints left by cycles of movement, the world repeated far longer than you've been here. When the next combined pulse hits, the disk reacts differently. The vibration under your feet deepens, lowering in pitch. The glow in the fractures brightens earlier than usual, as though the chamber is preparing for something. The columns of fog rise higher than before, stretching tall before sinking back down. The disk tightens the air again, this time longer, holding it for a few seconds. The warmth rises suddenly, soaking through the chamber without burning. The fog shakes, trembling so tightly it looks almost still. Then everything drops back to the normal rhythm. It feels like the chamber tested something. A small shift in behavior, a deeper cycle awakening and returning to rest. Moving further around the edge reveals a narrow opening on the chamber's far wall. Not a tunnel, not yet. More like a fissure the world hasn't decided to close or expand. Fog slips in and out through it slowly, drawn in tiny waves that match the deeper heartbeat. The fissure leads downward, not far, but far enough that the chamber's glow doesn't fully reach inside. The fog at the entrance is darker, thicker, barely trembling. It behaves the way it did in the areas closer to the planet's deepest layers. Standing near the fissure reveals a faint draft. Warm air rises through it in slow intervals, syncing with the deeper pulse. The heat isn't dangerous, it's controlled and steady, like everything else down here. Just enough to hint that the next layer is closer to whatever powers the disk. The chamber continues its rhythm behind you. The disk tightens the air with every beat. The fog responds in controlled tremors. And the fissure waits, quietly pulling the haze inward. The fissure isn't wide, but it's stable. The stone around it doesn't crumble or shift. It feels old, settled, like it has existed in this exact shape for longer than anything on the surface. The fog hanging at the entrance barely moves. It trembles in tiny, irregular patterns, reacting only when the deeper heartbeat rolls through the chamber behind you. Stepping into the fissure drops you instantly into a lower temperature. Not cold, just cooler than the chamber above, as if this layer traps less heat. The stone narrows into a corridor no taller than your shoulders, forcing you slightly closer to the ground. The glow from the fissure opening fades behind you in a matter of moments, swallowed by the heavier fog ahead. The deeper pulse grows more distinct here. It doesn't shake the floor, it moves through it. A quiet, steady vibration that feels older than everything above. Each beat rolls upward like a distant pressure, never rushing, always in control. The stronger pulse follows just behind it, blending into a single pattern the deeper you go. As you push further in, the passage widens unexpectedly. The ceiling rises, the walls slip back, and the fog thins around your waist. The stone in this new space carries fewer cracks, but the ones present glow with a deeper shade, closer to molten ember than surface red. The illumination is low, only enough to paint the fog in faint silhouettes. Ahead, the ground slopes into a long, curved descent. The stone forms a smooth path, steady and even, as if shaped by slow, continuous pressure. As you follow the curve, the fog thickens around your legs, warm again, moving in slow, heavy folds. It never rises above the knees. It stays low, as though something deeper keeps it pulled toward the floor. At the bottom of the curve, the corridor opens into a broad cavern. This one feels different the moment you step inside. The air is heavier in here, dense, warm, almost weighted, but still completely breathable. The fog trembles in larger ripples, spreading outward in perfect rings that fade as they near the walls. The light in the cavern doesn't flicker, it doesn't shift. It glows in long, slow breaths from cracks that run across the ceiling, pulsing evenly with the combined rhythm. In the center of the cavern lies a wide, circular depression. Not deep, just enough to form a defined bowl. The fog inside the bowl is darker than anything else you've seen. It lies thick across the surface, trembling in tight, controlled bursts. The moment the deeper pulse hits, the entire bowl contracts inward by a fraction, just enough to reveal a thin ring of stone around the edges before the fog expands again and covers it. You descend toward it, feeling the temperature shift again. This one is sharper. Not hot, not cold, just a controlled warmth that rises through the stone itself. The floor vibrates under each step, but not violently. It's a gentle sensation, almost like the world is breathing in a long, steady cycle. When you reach the edge of the bowl, the fog reacts immediately. It rises several inches, holds for a moment, then sinks again. The pulse follows closely behind. Each beat creates a pattern inside the haze, a single ripple that moves outward, hits the stone wall and returns to the center, forming a consistent rhythm. Looking closely at the center of the bowl reveals something the fog tries to hide. A circular plate embedded in the floor. Not the smooth, dark disc from the previous chamber, this one is different. The surface carries shallow rings carved into it, each one glowing faintly for only a moment when the deeper pulse hits. The glow travels along the rings, starting from the center and moving outward, creating a slow wave pattern that never changes speed. The deeper beat grows stronger here, sharper, clearer, more deliberate. This chamber feels like the first place where the planet's internal rhythm rises almost fully to the surface. Walking around the edge of the bowl shows even more detail. Small channels run from the plate outwards, etched into the stone floor. They're shallow, just enough to carry thin lines of light when the deeper pulse travels through the cave. Some connect directly to cracks in the walls, suggesting this chamber feeds energy into the surrounding rock. One point on the far side of the cavern catches your eye. A thin column of fog rises straight upward from the bowl, climbing toward a narrow opening near the ceiling. It doesn't waver. It doesn't drift sideways. It rises in a thin, unbroken line that disappears into the small gap above. Each time the deeper heartbeat thrums through the stone, the column grows taller by a few inches before settling back. It's the first vertical movement of fog you've seen in the entire world. Approaching that side of the cavern reveals a stone outcropping beneath the opening. The pulsing lines around it are brighter, thicker, feeding into the gap above, like the world is channeling something upward. Peering up through the opening, you see another faint glow, dimmer but present. The slit appears to lead into a higher chamber, or perhaps a narrow pocket where the pulse gathers before dispersing. The fog trembles around your ankles. The bowl contracts with the next double beat. The column of haze rises toward the ceiling again, slow and controlled. A low passage sits behind the outcropping, hidden by the fog until now. It carries no glow, no flicker, just a deep, unmoving darkness that feels older and more settled than anything you've passed yet. That passage is the only way forward. The passage behind the outcropping sits barely a meter high. The fog gathered around it is still, heavier than anything in the cavern above, trembling in slow, uneven shivers. The moment you step into it, the air changes. Not suddenly, just a steady shift where the warmth fades into something more neutral. The temperature settles into a controlled balance, as if this layer is insulated from the rest of the world. The stone inside the passage is darker, not from soot or residue, just naturally darker, like the pressure from deeper layers has compressed it into something denser. The glow from the cracks outside doesn't reach this far, and the fog reflects almost none of the light. You rely on the faint, deep red veins running along the floor, thin, steady lines that brighten only when the deeper heartbeat hits. The corridor slopes downward gradually, then levels out for a long stretch where the fog barely shifts around your arms. It sits at chest height here, thick enough that each movement sends slow waves out in front of you. The waves travel further than expected, carrying the pulse with them in tight, rolling vibrations. When the stronger beat arrives, the waves flatten gently. When the softer beat follows, they rise again. The deeper you go, the narrower the corridor becomes. Not tight, just close enough that the walls feel steady and intentional. They carry no cracks, no visible fractures, nothing that resembles the glowing channels above. They're smooth stone all the way down, cold to the touch, absorbing the warmth from your palm as if heat doesn't belong here. The pulse shifts for the first time in a long while. It doesn't stop, doesn't speed up, but it tightens. The space between the stronger beat and the softer one decreases slightly, giving the rhythm a more compact feel. You sense it through the soles of your feet and across your chest, a small adjustment that suggests you're approaching the deepest regulated section of the planet. The fog responds by rising higher, only by a few centimeters, but enough to show the rhythm is changing. Further ahead, the corridor widens again, abruptly this time, opening into a tall vertical chamber. The ceiling rises far above the fog, disappearing into darkness. The walls stretch upward in a continuous smooth curve, lit only by faint red veins running in long columns all the way to the top. They pulse in perfect sync with the newly tightened rhythm. The center of the floor holds something you haven't seen before. A long trench, narrow, straight, and perfectly smooth, runs from one end of the chamber to the other. It's filled with fog, darker and heavier than the haze above, trembling only when the deeper beat passes through the stone. The fog never spills over the sides. It stays confined to the trench, behaving as though the walls themselves keep it contained. Walking along the edge reveals that the trench is deeper than it first appeared. The fog inside is layered, darker at the bottom, lighter at the top, each layer responding differently to the pulse. The lowest layer reacts strongest, tightening sharply with every second beat, while the upper layers settle into slower movements. The air in this chamber carries a subtle pressure, not dangerous, just heavy enough to feel deliberate, like the world is directing everything downward. At the far end, the trench widens into a circular basin. The fog inside the basin sits lower than in the trench, almost pressed against the floor as though weight pushes it down in slow, steady cycles. Each time the softer beat rolls through the chamber, the fog in the basin sinks a little more before rising back to its original height. It behaves like a controlled pump, though nothing mechanical appears to be involved. You circle the basin and notice something unusual. A section of the stone floor beside it is different, slightly raised, perfectly smooth, with no cracks or glowing veins. When the deep pulse hits, this raised section vibrates more strongly than the surrounding stone. It feels like a receiving point, pulling energy from somewhere below and distributing it outward. The closer you get, the stronger the vibration feels. It's subtle but unmistakable, almost like a message passing through stone. On the far side of the basin, a narrow ramp descends into another opening. This one is shaped differently. It's taller, more defined, almost oval in shape, carved deeper into the stone than anything above. Fog pours down the ramp in a slow, continuous sheet, sliding into the darkness below without drifting outward. The surface of the haze trembles in tight, rapid ripples that never break formation. Standing at the top of the ramp reveals something else. The rhythm changes again. Not the speed, the emphasis. The softer beat grows stronger, no longer a secondary pulse. It rises through the stone with more weight, almost matching the primary rhythm. Both beats merge into something closer to one continuous cycle, as if the planet's deeper layers rely more heavily on the second heartbeat than the first. The ramp is warm under your feet. The fog sinks into the passage ahead. The air thickens just enough to feel like you're crossing another boundary. The world feels tighter here, more focused, more deliberate. The ramp drops at an angle that feels deliberate, not steep, not shallow, just steady enough that every step carries you deeper into the planet's rhythm. The fog slides down beside you in a constant stream, thin at the surface but stacking into thicker layers the further the ramp goes. It moves like it knows where it's supposed to be. It doesn't waver, it doesn't drift, it follows the slope as if drawn by a quiet pull from somewhere out of sight. Halfway down, the warmth deepens. Not dangerously, just a rising heat that settles into your legs and arms, like the stone beneath the surface is radiating controlled energy. The pulse changes again here. Not a shift in timing this time, but a change in depth. The softer beat grows heavier than the stronger one, sending a low vibration through the ramp that echoes into your chest. By the time you reach the bottom, the air feels dense, weighted in a different way than anything above. There's no pressure, no sense of being crushed, just the kind of thickness that suggests you've entered a part of the world where the atmosphere has settled into its most stable form. The room at the bottom is unlike the chambers above. It's enormous, wide, tall, but not completely open. Thick pillars rise from the floor in long, uneven rows, each one formed by the world's slow shaping rather than anything constructed. They stretch upward into the fog-filled ceiling, disappearing from sight as if they're part of something larger hidden above. The fog here is different from any you've seen. It doesn't drift. It doesn't pool. It holds its shape. Thin bands of it run between the pillars like suspended sheets, each one trembling gently in a fixed position. They look almost like thin curtains made of haze, but they never fall, never sag. They hang perfectly still until the deeper pulse passes through them. When it does, each sheet tightens for a moment, straightening, thinning, then relaxes again. The sheets sway ever so slightly with each pulse, but never enough to move out of alignment. They stay suspended between the pillars, forming narrow corridors of clear air that lead deeper into the chamber. Walking through one of the corridors reveals something new. When you pass by, the fog shifts in slow circular ripples around your movement. Not outward like waves. Around you, spiraling gently before settling into its suspended shape again. The fog reacts, but never breaks formation. It simply adjusts itself and returns to stillness. The pillars themselves pulse faintly with the deeper rhythm, the glow traveling up them in slow climbs that take several seconds to reach the ceiling. Each glow fades into the fog above, giving the sense that whatever powers this place doesn't remain in one layer. It rises slowly, steadily, feeding something hidden. The floor between the pillars is smooth and warm. The warmth isn't consistent. It rises in waves that match the secondary pulse. Every time the softer beat arrives, the stone beneath your feet tightens slightly, warming for a moment before relaxing again. The stronger beat still exists, but down here it feels like an echo compared to the deeper rhythm guiding everything. Further into the chamber, the fog sheets become denser, forming thicker layers that overlap slightly. They tremble harder with each beat, rising and falling in narrow motions that keep perfect time. Nothing down here is chaotic. Nothing wanders. Everything follows the same rhythm. At the far end of the chamber, the pillars bend inward, not sharply, but in a gradual arc that forms a kind of natural gate. The fog collects thickly beneath the arch, moving in tight coils that stay low to the ground. Every few seconds, the coils flatten entirely, pressed down by the deeper beat, before rising back into slow spirals. As you step closer, the stone vibrates more noticeably. Not aggressively, just with more clarity. Every pulse feels as if it's coming from directly beneath your feet now. The fog thickens around your knees, the air grows warmer, the world's deeper heartbeat becomes unmistakable. Beyond the arch lies another descent, steeper, narrower, with fog sliding down it in a constant flow that doesn't hesitate or pause. It pours like a slow river, guided by the pulse into the dark below. Standing at the top of that descent, the entire room shifts for the first time. Not physically, just in rhythm. The secondary beat rises in strength until it overtakes the primary completely. The fog responds with sharper trembling. The pillars pulse with longer, drawn-out waves of light. It feels like you've reached the point where the planet's deepest rhythm becomes the only one that matters. The descent beyond the arch feels different from every step you've taken so far. The fog doesn't just slide downward here, it pours, moving with a steady certainty, as if it's completing a cycle that's been repeating for ages. It flows past your legs in warm, continuous ribbons, trembling sharply with each beat of the deeper rhythm, following a path the world has shaped for it alone. The slope itself is smooth, worn by the same slow force that carved the upper layers. The temperature rises again, but not sharply. It's a gradual warmth, the kind that builds in a steady climb as you go deeper, settling into the stone and radiating upward in controlled pulses. You can feel the shift before you see it. The deeper heartbeat stops acting like a secondary rhythm. It becomes the only rhythm. The stronger beat, the one that guided the outer layers, fades into the background until it's nothing more than a faint echo. The entire descent hums with a single unified pulse now. A beat that feels older, slower, heavier, and far more deliberate. When you reach the bottom, the fog thins unexpectedly. Not dramatically, just enough that you can see the ground clearly for the first time in a while. The stone here is smooth, uninterrupted by cracks or veins. It's a solid surface, warm to the touch, gently vibrating with the steady pulse that fills the air. The space opens into a wide, circular chamber. It doesn't stretch upward the way the last one did. Instead, it circles inward. The walls curve down toward a shallow depression at the center, forming a shape that feels intentional without being constructed. The deeper beat travels across the stone in visible waves, faint ripples of red light that move from the outer walls to the center, fading as they reach the lowest point. The fog sits low here. It doesn't rise, it doesn't coil. It rests in a thin, quiet layer across the floor, trembling lightly but never lifting above the ankle. It's as if the fog knows this place is the end of its path. At the center of the chamber sits a formation unlike anything else you've seen. A circular plate, broader than the previous ones, lies embedded perfectly into the floor. Its surface glows faintly, not bright, not flickering, just a constant low red presence. Along its outer edge, thin ridges rise and fall in slow patterns, tightening slightly with each pulse before settling again. For a long moment, the world doesn't change. It simply waits. The deeper rhythm rolls through the chamber in a slow, steady wave. Each pulse travels along the floor toward the center plate, causing the fog to tremble gently before smoothing out again. The effect repeats over and over, shaping the air into a calm, predictable cycle. Approaching the plate changes the feel of the chamber. The warmth increases. The pulse grows clearer. The air tightens around your chest. Not painfully, just noticeably. Up close, the plate reveals fine lines running through it. Thin grooves that spread outward in circular patterns. Unlike the rings in the chambers above, these lines don't glow immediately. They react only when the deepest pulse hits, and when they do, they brighten in a slow, steady expansion, moving from the center outward like a controlled wave. The chamber responds with absolute precision. The pulse, the glow. The fogs tremble, all timed to the same rhythm. Walking around the plate shows how the chamber works. Channels carved into the floor carry faint warmth away from the center, directing the energy outward. The walls absorb it, then release it in dim ripples that move downward again. It's a closed system, repeating endlessly, with the plate acting as the heart of the cycle. But the most striking part isn't the glow, it's the silence. Not an absence of sound. There's no sound anywhere in this world, but an absence of movement. No shifting fog, no drifting haze, no unpredictability at all. Everything here is organized, steady, settled. The deeper heartbeat controls it all. The closer you stand to the plate, the more you feel the rhythm inside your chest matching it. Not forced, just aligned, as if the world's internal timing naturally pulls everything in the chamber into sync. Then something subtle shifts. The next pulse arrives slightly stronger. Not brighter, not louder, just stronger. The fog dips lower. The plate's grooves brighten a little longer. The heat rises for an extra moment. Then everything settles back into the steady pattern. It's like the world tested a deeper cycle, then returned to its resting rhythm. Looking at the far wall reveals something you missed on the way in. A small, narrow vent carved into the stone near floor level. Fog escapes through it in slow streams, pulled outward in thin, trembling lines. The vent seems to carry the excess energy or excess fog away from the chamber, feeding it back into the system above. Everything has a place. Everything follows the rhythm. Everything stays balanced. You stand in the lowest known layer, the quiet core of the world's heartbeat. There is no chaos here. No noise, no interruption. Just the patient, ancient rhythm the planet has kept long before you arrived, and will continue long after you leave. The pulse rolls through the chamber once more, steady as ever, and the world settles again into its endless, quiet cycle.